episode of Time Out with Mamata. I'm your host, Mamata Tharima. My today's guest is Dave Aston, who is a writer, an editor, a podcaster, a hashtag Monko Radio rockstar, and interestingly enough, an American history enthusiast. Let's welcome Dave Aston. Hi, Dave.
Hey.
How are you?
All right. Been a long time since we've seen each other face to face, so
Yes.
it's good to get together.
Yeah, thank you for making time to come here.
Sure.
I've been trying to have you for a long time, not because you are great, also because I like you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I like you for who you are.
Thank you.
So give us a little background about you. In your bio, you said you were born in Ohio.
Yes.
So how did you come to Pennsylvania and with family, and how did that happen?
Let me take you step by step. Born in what they call the home of the Wright brothers, a pair of bicycle repairmen who ended up creating a flying machine in 1903. I was born 76 years after that, so flight had become ubiquitous by then, so, and I'm not much for flying. But there's little old me, born to what were at the time two Christian pastors, which anybody who knows anything about Jewish iconography, clothing, all that, it sounds like this is going to be an interesting story, and it will be. I didn't know anything, obviously. I'm a baby. I'm new to the world. But within that first year, somebody found out that my mother had Jewish connections of some kind. And they received several death threats. One of them was to kill their newborn son, namely me.
Oh no.
And this happens like a week or two before my first birthday. So my mother and my father have to pull these strings with the organization they worked for, and it's like, my mother's like, no, we are moving. You are just telling us where, and it is happening today. This is January 31st, 1980. So I'm literally on the road celebrating my first birthday. My parents stopped somewhere, they bought a cake of some sort, and there are no pictures. But that's what happened. And it's, ooh, I'm starting to shake now.
Take your time.
Because that story carries with it other things that happened to me later in life. But that started off a weird journey of, who am I? What's my identity? Where do I fit in? And that's a question I'm still asking myself to this day. But eventually we moved down to southeastern Pennsylvania. My parents left that life behind, and by the mid-1980s, my mother gets definitive proof, yeah, we definitely have Jewish relatives. And the next thing I know, as a 8-year-old kid, I'm now stuck in a religious battle of a sort of, where's the family going? Are we gonna stay on the Christian track, or are we changing to this new thing called Judaism? And my mother framed it very, very interestingly. She said to me, we're gonna go an entire year.
Okay.
Your father's gonna do the Christian stuff. I'm gonna do the Jewish stuff, thinking that my mother had like the world of wisdom about everything Jewish, and she knew everything, could do everything. Little did I know that she was learning at the same time I was.
Oh.
It was a secret for those parents out there. Don't tell your kids sometimes. Don't tell your kids anything. Let them discover it while you're discovering it. It's an interesting religious journey, but we spent the entire year going back and forth from Hanukkah to Christmas, Passover to Easter. And with Judaism, there were other holidays, where in Christianity, there was basically nothing.
So was it that period of experimenting it for you? Getting a taste of both?
Well, sure, it was an experiment, and it was in hindsight, a wonderful experiment. And as a kid, as a really young boy, I went from a religion of rules of this is the box you have to fit in, this is what you have to do, you have to go to church, you have to be counted, you have to listen to stuff that you don't really understand, that's this esoteric thing that goes right over your head, into a religion that still had its esoteric nature, but there was a tangibility to it. Passover, you've got the matzah, you've got this fancy schmancy little dinner that you do at the beginning of the holiday. In the fall, the holiday of Sukkot, you literally have to go outside. Like imagine a 7-year-old being told, you must go outside and play. This is in the 1980s with no internet, with no cable TV.
Maybe no phone too.
Barely.
Yeah.
Phone at the time.
Land phone maybe.
Landlines at the time, they were used for, you called the neighbors, you called 911, you called the cops. You know, that's all it was for at the time. So you didn't even use phones for fun. You used it as a tool. So it was much, much more tangible, and it felt so much more real, so that by the time the year was over, what was the logical choice? I want to go for the religion that has the tangible, that has the immediate feel, that has the everything I can put my hands on, versus the other religion that's this sterile box where I'm forced to go to church, I'm forced to do something. That's not something a 7-year-old wants to hear. So it sort of started to solidify my identity, but not really, because for years after that, we had no idea of really communally what all that meant. You know, are there other people? Am I the only Jewish kid around? Where am I to go? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to learn? And those were the roadblocks that my mother didn't know. Fair to her. This is all brand new to her. And so over the years, we slowly learned, we slowly adapted, and it wasn't until I was 10, almost 11 years old, we found a Jewish community, and then all of a sudden, oh, the door's open, and there's more things to learn, more things to do. Okay, so that's like the speed synopsis of my young childhood.
And now you finalized that you want to practice Judaism, and are you at peace? Do you like what you practice? Do you like you believe?
Now, yes. But
Okay.
that's 3.5 decades after the fact. At the time, no. Because very quickly, once we found a community, the same box-like nature started to happen. There was a routine. There was a detachment of tangibility, and it started to become old pretty quick. There was nothing new, nothing adventurous. And the large part of that, I know this sounds kind of crazy because I'm talking about an 11-year-old, but there wasn't anything, you know, there wasn't anything spiritual to draw on. There wasn't anything knowledge-based or academic to draw on. You don't play with your Legos from 5 to 50. You progress out of that. As they say about men, you don't get rid of your toys just get bigger and more expensive. And spiritually, mentally, that's what I was looking for, but didn't know how to express that. So for almost 10 years, there was nowhere to go. There wasn't any new avenue. So I was well into my teens before I started to understand that I was the one becoming too stagnant because I thought that's what I had to be. And that folded into problems at school. Because my entire life I was in public school. And in public school, you don't stay static, but the idea of doing things in a static way is like the norm. And that really got troublesome for me because I shifted away from Christianity when I was in middle school. And we're talking about the wrong time to shift from one extreme to the other. That was it. And I remember constant arguments and conversations in various places in the school, including several times where I had people bully me, physically hit me, throw pennies at me, call me every epithet in the book you could imagine, just because I admitted to having been Christian, stepped away from it, and went somewhere else. This is the
But
early...
isn't this country the freedom of religion?
Yes, on paper.
Okay.
On paper, yes. And let me not be so disingenuous, because it is much better now.
Okay.
Despite what you people may hear from the media and from different podcasters and so forth, it is much better now than it was when I was growing up. The 90s, for all of the negative talk that a lot of people may hear, the 90s was the transformative decade. From it's there, it's legal, but do your own thing anyway, to let's get with the program. It's there, it's legal, and now culturally let's start acting like it. And that, in my opinion, we're now at the pinnacle of that, where regardless of where you are from or what religion you practice, very few people are going to get into your face and threaten you. Back then it wasn't quite that simple. Back then it was, sure, legally I can't do it, but if nobody sees it, is it really a crime? And that's where that got into. And I wasn't backed up by school administration at the time. There were accusations. My parents threatened to sue the school. All kinds of different things happened. It even got so bad where our neighbor at the time decided to stop hiding the fact that he was a neo-Nazi.
Oh, wow.
And carved that famous Roman symbol on our back wall, right by our back door.
So did you have to like hide it or to protect yourself?
I felt the necessity to hide it.
Okay.
You know, the fringes tucked into my pants, the yarmulke would, you know, which is underneath my ball cap here, would be tucked in my pocket. And only when I felt safe, when I got home or was in a place where I felt where I wouldn't reasonably be assaulted, that's when I brought it out. And, you know, I'm all proud in private and quiet. And this made my mother happy, because my mother is the child of a Holocaust survivor, it turns out. So she was like, yeah, that's okay. That's fine. That's the perfect way to do it. Don't publicize it to the world. Don't tell everybody loud, proud, and probably to the point of peaking your audio, I'm Jewish, and that's okay. Back then, it was a little bit more of a balancing act. So, and it mentally threw me into a box. By the time I graduated high school, I graduated the bottom third of my class. By then, I was like, it doesn't matter who I am. I've been boxed here. It's starting to get comfortable. I'm going to stay there. And regrettably, I stayed there for a very long time. Very long time. I'm here for a mission. I'm here to not just look Jewish. I have to be Jewish.
Yeah.
There are things I have to do.
Your lifestyle and all that.
Right. I'm not going to hide it. And the things that I hadn't been doing at home as well, because it bled into things at home with how family dynamics played out and things like that. Stuff that I had to do at home, I stepped that up too.
Now let's talk about family also. Who do you have in your family? You talked about your Christian father and Jewish mom, and then who else?
My father is a convert. He at that time of figuring things out and transitioning from one to the other, after that whole thing when I was a young child, my father went through the processes of converting. Okay. So he too is Jewish. Okay. So by the time my two sisters, who are now both scratching 30, it's been that many years. Okay. Sorry. I'm like, where's the time gone?
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah. By the time they were born, everything was sort of settled. But again, that played in another dynamic. I was almost 15 years old when my mother announces, surprise, for the first time in almost 15 years, not only has she, thank God, going to have a successful pregnancy, But yeah, there's going to be a successful pregnancy.
I was about to say 15 years.
There's gonna be a child. Now, take off the rose-tinted glasses and fast forward not even 7 months, and then reality settles in. No, this isn't normal. You've got problems, gestational diabetes, and all kinds of medical issues from my mother just started to pile up. And 7.5 months later, my older sister is born at 1 pound, 13.5 ounces, with a single layer of skin. I don't know if anybody knows what I mean by that. I mean literally, your skin has like several layers. She had 1 layer of skin. You could see her heart through her chest cavity. That's a jarring image for a 15-year-old to see. I was like a week or two after my 15th birthday. You know, usually some kind of milestone in most cultures. For my family, my 15th birthday was basically ignored.
Yeah, I can tell.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, you have a X-week-old baby who's in an isolation unit. She's 24/7, covered in doctors, covered in medicines, covered in whatever the most advanced technologies were for the mid-1990s. The first time I saw her, my life changed in 2 ways. And they talk a lot about the human mind being able to hold contradictory thoughts. Mm-hmm. Your mind can also hold contradictory feelings. When my sister was about 4 or 5 months old, she was not allowed yet to come home. She wouldn't come home until she was almost 7 months old.
Okay.
So about 4 months or so after she was born, I was invited into the hospital to hold her for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And any parent or sibling that does that for the very first time, especially someone that's quite literally, if you stretched her out, she went from head in the palm of my hand to the tips of her toes and the crook of my elbow, stretched out.
And you're 15-year-old.
Right, and I'm 15 years old, and she's waddled in these blankets. There's like 3, 4, 5 layers of blankets just to make it so she doesn't move. And I'm presented with this thing that has bones the size of pencils. Just put that image in your head. And boom, right in my hands. Put out your hands like this, and I'm feeling frightened, like primordial frightened, and mad at the same time. Animalistically mad at the same time.
At what?
Frightened is the self-evident part. Mm-hmm. I have this fragile X-month-old in my hands.
Right.
The anger was at no longer having been an only child. And like it sunk in. Because prior to that, it's a mystery, it's a myth, maybe it didn't happen. And then you have the proof in your hands. But then there's this third distinct emotion that I felt that was, okay, now I have a responsibility. I'm the firstborn. I'm the firstborn son. It's my job to protect her. So the anger had to get allayed. The fear had to get allayed. They both had to get pushed apart. And I had to focus in on this. This now has to be my world. And it was tough. It was very tough. There were numerous times where I had to step in not knowing what the heck I was doing.
Now, you were an only child for 15 years.
Yeah.
So what kind of child you were? Were you like extrovert, introvert?
No, very, very, very introverted.
Yeah?
Oh, to this day, I hate crowds.
Yeah.
I hate crowds.
But you talk where crowds come.
How ironic is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten used to it. I've developed different techniques to be able to look people in the eyes, to be able to, be expressive in a crowd where in the back of my head, they're being judgmental. What are they saying about me? And, that still goes on, but I have learned to ignore that. I didn't learn that at 15. So at 15, it was like everything's still judgmental. When I was even younger, it was even worse because I had medical issues of my own. And those occasionally manifested themselves in public. So that was like, okay, so everybody's judging me. I'm the runt of the litter. Everybody's laughing at me. Even to this day, there's a piece of my brain where I hear laughter of someone nearby me, and there's a piece of my brain that still says, are they laughing at me? It's kind of silly. It's kind of childish, but that's the direction my brain went. I never saw, when I was a young kid, never saw any of my talents being worth anything. I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm okay with whatever.
Right. Oh yeah, this time.
You know,
Yeah.
you just kind of have to grow to that level of maturation. It just says it is what it is. If somebody likes it, fine. If not, I'm moving on.
Yeah. But for 15-year-old holding this little creature in your arm, you know, that anger and then fear that you had to let go. I mean, even 15-year-old nowadays generation don't think like that. Although you were introverted, I think you were very mature deep inside somewhere with all the responsibility. And as you just emphasized on the first son, you know, in our culture also, if the firstborn is a son, not a girl, a son, then a lot of responsibilities are naturally, by default, given to the son.
It's on my lap.
So,
you gotta.
So that's the same case, right?
You gotta continue the family name. You gotta make sure that you have, you know, that you build your own family. You create your own career. You still have to support your parents in every way conceivable. Not just the normal honor your father and mother and you basically wait on them hand and foot, but they need anything. Don't get angry. They curse at you, don't get angry. Like that whole dynamic, because you have to set that standard. And this is something I think is missing from American culture, to be honest.
Yeah.
You as the firstborn, frankly regardless of gender, you set the standard. You're the one where when the siblings come behind you, you're the one to whom they look. They're not going to look to the parents. The parents are the disciplinarians. The parents are the ones that can tell you no. You're the one that's that gatekeeper of, is it really right? Do I really have to follow what parents and the neighbors and this person, this older person tell me? You become that decision factor. But you also hold the responsibility of being the fun one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so you're walking in two worlds at the same time, and for me, that was difficult because for so long I had developed my own identity that learning how to balance those two that late in life was like, whoa, real life hitting me in the face, and then it repeated itself 2 years later. New sister. Bigger problems, more time getting spent into her health needs. So by that time, I'm starting to feel like I need to be put on the back burner. So before my parents did it to me, stupidly, I did it to myself.
Okay. Because you thought it was coming, it's gonna come, so why not you just start?
Exactly.
Yeah. So Dave, I met you at Montgomery County Community College around 12-13 that time, and that time you said you started college, and I was a little surprised that, is this your first time college or were you somewhere else? You said no, this is your first time in college. So why did you, I think you were around 30 or a little over that?
I was in my early 30s.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why did you take such a long gap from high school graduation to join to college?
Very good question. I took the long gap because dark years happened in between high school and going to Montco. And like the tipping point was around 2008. There was an attack in Mumbai, India.
Well, yeah.
And dozens of people were unfortunately murdered. A good number of them were Jews. And the one part of that story that hit home for me was that two of these people that were unfortunately lost their lives were emissaries of a particular Jewish community with which I had had a very strong tie for many years. And they were my age.
Wow.
They were in their late 20s. And they were doing things I could have never conceived of, you know, because of my outlook on the world. And then I get the news that these people who I'd never met, didn't even know existed. They're my age. They're gone.
Yeah.
Solely for the fact that they were either Jewish or in the way.
Yeah.
And probably both.
Yeah.
It's hard to know this many years out. And that broke me. Spiritually, mentally, it created a new crisis of, I haven't done anything, I'm not doing anything, and now I see my life as purposeless. And I held on to that for 4 years. Fast forward to February of 2012. I'm just doing my normal job. And a very famous rabbi from this same community travels all the way from California to a tiny little store where I am working in Northeast Philadelphia in the dead of winter. It's cold. There had been a snowstorm recently. It was gross. It was disgusting. It was a miserable night. And he comes walking in, has no intentions of buying a thing. He sees a fellow Jew, namely me, and asks me for directions.
Okay.
And somehow, for some reason, I just reacted. I moved as if I had been challenged with some important task that was going to change the world. And he's like, where are you from and what are you doing? And then we exchanged names. And he tells me his name. And it's one of those moments, it shakes you to your core, because you hear the name, you remember it from somewhere important, and it felt like I had turned myself into like a little schoolboy, because I'm like, I know who you are. And the next thing I know, I'm embraced in this bear hug from this 60-plus-year-old man.
Wow.
He treating me like a long-lost friend. It was this energetic turnaround at literally the darkest point of the year. But from there, I'm like, okay, it's time to do something new, something different. I got more involved in my local Jewish community. I applied for Montco. My sister graduated that summer. That summer, I picked up a novel that would forever change my writing talents, called The Hunger Games. So when you combine those two positive inserts, everything that happened from the fall of 2012 forward started that winter.
It's interesting. You brought something different at the college that time. Although community college do accept all age range and education is open and welcome to everybody, but besides your education, you have done other things for that you stand out.
Yeah, well, thank you for the compliment, first off. But yeah, the sort of preamble to that is, I had just started out, when you came to Montco, I had just started out being the editor of the newspaper. Like, it was brand new at that point to me. I got sort of thrown into it, as I like to call it, frying pan to fire, because the entire staff had quit the prior semester. So I was like listening for an entire semester. We need an editor, we need an editor, we need writers. And I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. There were no other hats that went into the ring. It was only me. So I had to go from, here are these articles, they're due, here's the deadline. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's me. And then a year after that, I was like, okay, let's do something else. So I made my life even more busy by taking on being on Montco Radio. But right there, I had no idea what was I allowed to do, what could I do, what could I talk about. And when Matt Porter, the gracious Matt Porter, who we both love.
Nothing but love.
Oh,
that's the man.
Nothing but love.
There you go.
There we go. His Facebook posts kill me. But he was like, as long as you have a plan and you can stay within an hour, that's it. Don't curse, don't disparage the college. Those were the two rules. And that was enough for me, because I was like, okay, that means I can talk about some of the taboo things that you're not supposed to talk about. And instantly I went to current events because nobody on that radio station was talking about it. Everybody was doing sports, very little of it.
Music.
A couple were doing movies. Almost everybody was doing music of varying stripes. So it was kind of an eclectic mix, but I was like, okay, if music and minds meet, where are the minds? So I was like, just do it. And my first show, which in hindsight I'm glad was never recorded for posterity, I overplanned. I had 3 co-hosts at the time, and I had like 3, 4, 5 subjects planned. I had no idea, you know, because I'm looking at like radio and television. They talk about 20 things in 20 minutes. I hadn't really thought about how do I structure it? How do I keep things going? I eventually learned, you know, only 1 or 2 things, 3 at the most, and just let people talk. And that was the hard part for me at first, was forcing myself to shut up and let somebody else talk. That was really hard.
Because you were also someone who would be very open to express your opinion. You're not just a typical host.
That's correct. That's correct. That was the odd part that kind of shocked me at first. I didn't understand mentally that there was an audience on the other side of that microphone, and that maybe they didn't always want to hear from me. But again, coming through this whole story of being an introvert, convincing myself I had nothing to give to the world, and then all of a sudden taking that script and literally flipping it the moment I hit go live.
Yeah.
The microphones were on, I was live.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, something clicked in my head that made me now all of a sudden loquacious, verbose. I knew half of the English dictionary and I didn't mind using it. But I learned very quickly through that first season, those 15 episodes that are still on my website, preserved for posterity. I learned very quickly I was the one that had to learn to not talk so much, that there's a balance. And sure, people want to hear from me. I'm the host of the show, and producer, and writer, and publicist, and marketer, and.
Things that I did not cover in the title. Yeah.
Well, that's because I only did it for a couple of years.
Now he's doing and because I couldn't fit all in one. You know? There you go.
just put those 3 dots. Writer, producer, podcaster, American. What did you call me?
Buff.
History enthusiast. I think were the words you used. Just put 3 more dots. Keep going. How many hats can I wear?
Yeah. I mean, your theme was, as far as I know, was always you were very interested into politics. Talk about what's happening in the country, social issues, anything that's happening in the country that's bothering people, facing a lot of criticism and all that.
Yeah.
You have the guts to bring that on the table and talk about it.
To people several years my junior.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that, like, how did I coordinate that? I don't know how I coordinated. I just did it.
Yeah, because you mixed all the generation together. It's not like people are around your age or older, because our mind develop as we grow older.
Right.
So why you chose that topic? Was it something you always wanted to have an outlet and medium to just speak your heart out, because you could not do for years? You used to hide things. So you're good at hiding as a kid. What is that?
I think that's a large part of it, and the being on radio as opposed to this podcast is you don't get to see my face.
Yeah.
So I'm still hiding, but I'm not. So it was that happy transition ground. I think that's part of it. But it was more the idea of the younger generation doesn't want to talk about this, but you have to. Whether you agree with me or the general, cultural zeitgeist or not, You have to talk about this. Whether you know about the details of the subject or not, you have to talk about it. Because those coming from behind me, from the younger generations, you are going to be the new leaders. Eventually, I'm going to grow old. I'm already stuck in my ways. I was in my late 30s by the time I graduated Montco. So I was stuck in my ways before I ever walked in the door. When you're younger, you're not quite fully set. So you have the ability to adapt, to grow, to change, to expand. And that I found as like my niche. That's where I could fit in, because I can bring in my quote wisdom of the ages and sort of pull that younger generation forward and say, hey, this is happening to you now. Time for you to speak up. Time for you to talk about this. And in a way that's more interactive than reading something in a newspaper. So it was the next logical step beyond
like discuss about it, talk about it, and not just reading the facts or opinions.
And talk about it literally on the fly.
Right.
You don't have to carry your encyclopedia with me. You literally just give me the thoughts that are off the top of your head. A lot of other shows, especially in big time radio, but even on Montco Radio, it's all experts from the field, people who work in politics, people who've done these jobs for X number of years. That's not what I wanted with any of my shows at all.
That's interesting.
I wanted the raw, unfettered opinion, supportable, logical, reasonable or not. It didn't matter to me. I wanted people to come in, have the opinion, and then go, okay, here's the advantage and disadvantage. Here's where your reasoning is flawed, and here's where it's somewhat solid. So I let the conversation go where it was meant to go. So the leadership grew out of a bit of uncertainty, a bit of angst, but you kind of just have to pick up and run with it. And that was one of the things I learned very, very early on at that point. And then seeing people like you come there, and you're literally from another world. And it was like, okay, so I'm not the only, quote unquote, out of place person. It's like you're on your journey and here I am on mine, and we intersected. And I think the first time we actually saw each other face to face was on Montco Radio.
Yes.
So that was what, 2015?
Yeah. I was on your show. I was talking about Malala Yousafzai, a Pakistani girl who was attacked by Taliban.
Yes.
That was part of your Hard Rock Hard Talk.
At that time, it was show was called Debatable News.
Yes. Now, you're on your website, you said hiding was something you're good at as a child, and you did not get so much love and support, positivity growing up, and you had a lot of insecurities too before. Some of these were like hiding, just not being expressive and all that. Now as an adult and in your 40s, right? So what are your new insecurities now?
My new insecurities are, how can I get a better paying job? That's my elephant in the room. But it's still on that same fundamental level of, I have all these talents, all these new skills. Who's going to see it? And if they see it, is it going to matter? And I've been through some recent heartaches where I've put out manuscripts. I have done my best to try to keep up my own podcasting stuff, which I'll admit has hit the rocks. But it's all like, okay, in the end, does it really matter? Is someone going to see it? Because I'm one small person in this ocean of, I don't know, flotsam, ingenuity, all these different talents, these different people that are recognized, people that aren't. Is it really going to matter? In the end, I have to settle on the idea that it doesn't have to matter to a ton of people. That it has to matter to exactly two. Me and to those with whom I have the greatest impact. Yep. Like you, for example.
Yes.
And that I have to start to settle down into that idea of that has to be good enough.
So let's talk about your website. What's there and what's the website, and can you share that with the audience?
The website is daveastonmedia.com. Almost all of my creative work going back now nearly a decade is up there. Short stories, some old news articles, and almost all of the audio production that I've done is up there. So it's basically my active resume.
Okay, that's great.
Little snippet about me, projects that I've been working on that are still in progress. But it is what it is. It's a slice of me, and you may not like everything you hear, but I hope that you learn from it.
Of course, it doesn't have to be liked by everybody. It has to be loved by few.
I like that advice.
Yes. So you shared something with me before in one of our conversation that that 9/11. After the 9/11 incident, what you saw in American citizen was something that you have never experienced, and I've never heard anybody saying anything like that. I'm very interested and curious, and would like you to share that with others.
Sure. First thing that anybody born after 9/11 has to understand, or people who like yourself emigrated to the States after 9/11,
right,
is that the United States that existed before that terrible Tuesday morning is gone and has been gone since then. It will never return. An America where the worst arguments we ever had were about fiscal policy and this corporation gaining too much money and that corporation not having enough and the middleman getting squeezed. That's really all we had to worry about by the 1970s to the 1990s. Sure, we can talk about the money issues, but the sense of true freedom of knowing what American values were and living them and allowing them to be adapted without serious pushback, and making almost everything political to some stripe. That's what America used to be in the 20th century. After 9/11, it slowly shifted to the other direction, but for a very brief period of time, roughly 2-3 years, we were as unified as I had ever seen America ever.
Oh, really?
Yes. Those towers got hit. The first tower got hit. It was, oh my God, this is America. We're being hit. Now it's time to get off the shock and figure out, how can we help and support our neighbor. The second tower got hit, we realized we were at war.
Yeah.
But the day after, you had total strangers, homeless people. You had, and the videos are still up about what happened in downtown New York. You had total strangers passing out bottles of water, helping people get cleaned, get medical attention. Total strangers. Like the
unity.
The complete depiction of Americana, of every single stripe. The businessman making 7 figures a year, the nurse from around the block, random people banding together in arguably one of the most contentious and divided cities of the country, especially in the 20th century, just stopped and they said, how can I help my fellow man? And the crime of it all was partly due to the wars that America got into. Because that created a cultural fatigue, and within not even 7 years, everything went to a sharp divide of right and left.
Yeah.
And if you weren't on one, you were assumed to be on the other. And it expanded into a whole bunch of things. People being accused, rightly or wrongly, of all kinds of racially insensitive things, of
religion thing also,
right?
Yeah.
Assuming the way somebody dressed
Yeah,
was
Islam.
automatically a problem, whether you were Muslim. Jews accidentally got mixed into that fray due to ignorance, and yeah, there were problems, but for those first couple of years after 9/11, it was the purest depiction of none of that mattered. It was the rawest expression of all of the, tangentially, the racial healing that America went through from the 70s through to the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 decades, that was the culmination of it, was those couple of years after 9/11, and then it all just went down through the political toilet.
Mm.
And it's the saddest change, because now we have an entire generation who grew up with the sharp political divide, and it's all anyone sees. I don't know who, if anyone there is to blame, but it would be nice to rewind the clock a little bit.
Yeah.
Go back to those couple of years after that awesome and terrible day and just freeze frame it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Any piece of advice you have for new generation?
Piece of advice. Yes, here's a piece of advice. Cherish every single moment. Cherish every single person you meet. And even if your advice may be immature, give it anyway.
Wow.
Because you never know who you might inspire. And it may even be on a dark night in a very cold February. You might just come across one person who may need you to lift them up. And ironically, they'll lift you up.
So you're saying it reciprocate. What you give, you get it back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Absolutely.
I have seen you behind the mic many times. I have heard your voice on Monco Radio. One thing I have seen it consistently is that no matter what, you hold on to your principle and your standard, and even to this compelling arguments that you have, that also has a little sassy side of it, because you hold on to your principle that this is what I feel about it. You're very true to your feelings. And I know you had to work hard to get to this point in your life, but that's something I really admire about you. And I would like to tell people too that just breathe, just what you feel, don't be afraid to express it. And you have the guts to talk about a lot of sensitive topics. You need to have the bravery, and I salute you for that. And that's why I think it's contagious. When you talk about it, it gives me some type of fire. I can also talk about a couple things that other people might dislike me after that. But hey,
you have to take that risk.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
your time here. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you liked it, please share and subscribe to my channel. My channel name is Mamata Tharima, MAMATA THARIMA. More episodes are coming up soon, so stay tuned.